Welcome to the official podcast of FOR ETERNIA.com. We have the power. I'm your host, AJ, aka Voodoo Magic, aka Zor. And today's episode is titled A New Beginning, because today, Wednesday, September 11th, is the day when the fantastic fourth and final issue of the comic prequel series Masters of the Universe Revolution from Dark Horse Comics hits comic book shelves and digital platforms everywhere. It's a comic that concludes with the words, "A New Beginning," and contains a wonderful reveal that this story not only prequelizes this animated universe we love, but sequelizes it. A comic that craftily shows us the flip side of a coin where a prequel story can also be perceived as a sequel story, and even advances the narrative of Masters of the Universe Revolution in a brief but substantial way. Do you love Masters of the Universe Revolution? Do you want to know what happens next? Then you need to buy this book, this series, and read it today. Hit pause, go to your local comic book store and find them all and buy them all, or buy them digitally on Kindle right now. Then unpause this podcast, because today, this podcast is graced again by a special guest, one of the brilliant creators of this comic book series. He stopped by once again to talk the conclusion of this next installment of the Revolution universe, which is required reading for all who love those shows. Yes, you know him, you love him, I love him, the great TIM Sheridan. Tim, thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh, the great. I'll take that any day of the week.
The great. You're not only great, I love it when you're here because you raise the IQ of this podcast. Tremendous.
Yes, simply by being such an idiot, it makes everybody else look smarter around me. That's why.
Oh, that's funny. So Tim, before we even get into the heart of it, the meat of it, and spoiler warning for this podcast, everyone, because there will be spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious
for me too, because it's been a long time since I wrote this, so I'm going to be surprised by things.
Yeah, we're going to caveat that Tim hasn't actually read the finished product yet, so we're going to give him
I haven't seen the final product yet.
We're going to give him a break if he can't recall something. So, but as not just a comic reader, but a comic creator, I encouraged the audience just a moment ago to get the physical comics or read them digitally. Do you have a preference in regards to like a favorite way to read comics?
Well, okay, this is where it's going to get tricky. I read comics a lot on my iPad, but I often talk to fans and readers, and I'll say, this is available digitally, you should read digitally. And almost always when I say that, somebody will say, yeah, but I hate reading comics on my phone. And I say, oh my gosh, yeah, don't read it on your phone. I just have this, it's my privilege of owning a tablet where I'm just like, I feel like everyone has tablets, so it seems like a good way to read them. But yeah, no, on a phone seems like a terrible idea. So there's that. There's the fact that I do that, which is going to really infuriate all the comic book retailers that I am friends with and partners with, because my official stance on this is, digital is great for stuff that you just can't get your hands on, but if it's a new book like Masters Revolution or any of the DC books that I've done, always better to pick up that physical copy, not just because of the experience of reading it like we read them when we were kids, but also you're an integral part of the economy of comic books. And, local comic shops depend on readers coming in and buying books off of their shelf. And, we do everything we can to help retailers out. It's a tough time for comic book retailers. It's a really tough time. You go into a comic book shop and you can see, they've got a lot of other stuff on the shelf. They have to, figure out other revenue streams to try and stay in business. And we can't let those businesses fail. We can't. They're an essential part of the economy and the world of comics, and not just because they're a place where you buy comics, but they're a place where you meet other people who read comics, where you share recommendations, where you talk about stuff that you might like, that they might like. I know a lot of that happens on the internet now, but the internet is a scary place, AJ. I don't know if you're aware, but I know we're on it right now, but it can be a terrifying place. And there's something about being in person with people. I say this about conventions all the time. I love going to fan conventions because I've always gone to them as a fan, and now I get to go and meet fans of the stuff that I'm doing, and people want to talk about stuff they like, and it's all very positive there. Whereas on the internet, you just get hit with all kinds of negativity, and people talk about stuff they hate. It's the same thing in comic book shops, and not just among the clientele there, but those who run comic book shops. They are an excellent resource. They know so much about the business, about what's happening, what's coming out. They're in charge of what's coming out. You know, we pitch these things to retailers and we say, what do you think? Are you going to want to buy this? And they're like, yeah, we can sell that. You know, so it's so important to go into those stores and pick up those physical copies, especially for Masters of the Universe. You know, Masters of the Universe is like a little engine that could in the world of comics. You know, Dark Horse's numbers on these, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I'm not privy to this information, but I've written stuff at DC Comics, and I know that the numbers that sell in terms of DC Comics are not what they were when I was a kid. You know, so I imagine for smaller publishers, those numbers are even smaller, and I think a lot of people don't think to go into a comic book store and pick up Masters of the Universe content. It is so important, I think, for this community, this fan community of Motu, to get out there and support these books. And this isn't just because I've written them, you know, I want you to buy my books. It's if you love this and you want to see more of them, the best way to do that is to go into your local comic book shop regularly when they've got new Masters of the Universe books on shelf. Pre-order what's coming out before the final order cutoff for that store, and you know, tell them you want it. Put them on a pull list. Make sure they know, and that's how we get to keep making more. That's how more get into the hands of fans, and how more stories get to happen. We don't know if there are going to be more stories on TV. We have no idea, but fans have the most direct impact on whether we get more stories in comics. They have incredible impact.
Yeah. You know, I try to support my local comic book store with the trades and so forth. And even though they're a little pricier than Amazon, you know, I try to make sure that I'm a loyal customer to them. You know, actually, they did a fantastic thing with the Masters of the Universe. I think it was Revelation art book, where you could only get the art book like something like 30 days before. Don't quote me on the exact time, but 30 days before Amazon had it available. So you could walk into a comic book store, get it now, or if you ordered it from Amazon, you're waiting an extra few weeks. And
yeah, that's a great sort of way to do it. Yeah. Incentivize people who want it early to get into the store. Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. So
I'm sure Amazon loved it.
So I try to buy them both physically and digitally, and because I do love it also on the tablet, because the colors pop. Oh, the artwork pops.
They do.
And I love that guided view sometimes, you know, because sometimes
they get it right. It's really cool. Yeah.
Sometimes my eyes can wander and like spoil a scene for me of what's coming up next. But with the guided view, nothing gets spoiled. So
I will say, if you only watch it in guided view, go back and do it outside of guided view too, because one of the most underrated, you know, talents of comic book artists is page layout. And they put artists put so much thought into, and Daniel HDR is one of these artists, into how it all fits and looks on one page. That is part of the storytelling, is when you turn the page and you see the whole picture, what does it look like? And so when you do the guided view only, you don't quite get that. You can't get that.
You're right.
Always good to go back and watch it in full view too.
And since we're talking the digital artwork really popping. Oh my God. Oh my Lord. Can we talk the covers by Dave Wilkins
I
on
know.
I mean all
We're so embarrassingly lucky to have.
I mean all the covers are gorgeous. I'm not but I mean Dave Wilkins feels like next level, you know, and his covers are just glorious. His standard covers for issues 1 through 4. I love them.
Mhm.
And then, is there a reason Dave didn't feature Keldor on the cover? Always Skeletor? Is that probably because the inclusion of Keldor was supposed to be a secret? You know?
Yeah, I think originally, like, we know that the covers. I mean, look, I'm speculating right now because I'm not in those conversations.
Right.
But just as somebody who works in the business, the covers, the art for those things get released so far in advance that you want to be sure you're not spoiling story stuff too early with those kinds of things. So I'm sure some kind of consideration went into that, but you'd probably have to ask Brett Israel, our editor, or Dave himself, to see what the calculation was on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a concern, or Mattel would be, probably would tell us that they wanted to keep it spoiler free. But these covers have been such beautiful Hordak and Skeletor, ruminations that this issue 4 cover, I'm looking at it right now on a giant screen right next to me here. I mean, gosh, that Hordak is unreal.
Oh, I know. The first issue too, and then what was it? The third issue where the flesh is peeling off Skeletor's face.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
So you know what? Hey, let's roll. Since we're talking the art, let's roll into the art, because I got a big question for you in regards to Daniel HDR, and maybe you can answer this. Because he's done an absolutely spectacular job doing the artwork.
It's fantastic.
But what I am fascinated the most with is it seems like every issue concludes with this like gorgeous page that is placed within this artistic frame, that sometimes feels like a large freestanding ornate mirror in a way, And do you know the genesis of that? I mean, I've never seen a series conclude with artwork like that. It's beautiful.
I mean, I would love to pick his brain about his choices on that. I've never spoken to him about it. But what I do, I can tell you what I do is, I'm pretty traditional the way I design, sort of the script and the story. I will always end an issue with a splash page. So it's a one full panel on a page. So I try to make it something that is impactful, that's exciting, that's going to make you want to pick up next month's issue. So, that's what I will write, and I'll design something like that. And then the artist gets to interpret that however they want. Now, if the artist decides, no, I want this to be a couple of panels or to more, I want to break it out and do some more stuff, they are absolutely, at liberty to do that. Right. But I tend to favor doing something really splashy and, like a cliffhanger kind of thing with a fun tagline, zinger, slammer, to get you excited about the next issue. And it's certainly, if it's the end of a series, like in issue 4 here, it'll still have something impactful like that, but end with something that concludes the story, but then points to, something coming in the future. In this case, we talk about, the new beginning. But that's really up to the artist, how they want to interpret that. And Daniel's been doing this really fun thing, like you said. I love your description of it, where it feels like you're looking at a magic mirror, on those last pages. It's he's fantastic. He's really fantastic.
It feels like this is such a bad word. Artwork. It is artwork. Let me think. Like it belongs in a gallery almost. It looks a gallery piece. You do your art, your splash page, and then you want to do a gallery piece. Yeah.
Well, that's the rule of thumb that my first editor in comics told me when it comes to splash pages or double page spreads that are a double page splash, where it's one giant image.
Yeah.
They said if you're writing, I think early on, I did a script for a DC comic, and I had a double page spread of one panel, and it was the exterior of a house. And you saw balloons for people that were saying a few things, just some dialogue that was happening inside the house. And then you turn the page and the story, you're inside the house and you see the story play out. And my editor called me and he said, "A double page spread of a exterior of a house, huh?" I was like, what? I was like, because I'm thinking, well, yeah, story wise, it's an establishing shot for the, it's how I would do it in TV. And he said, no, a splash page, and it's certainly a double page spread, needs to be something that the reader would want to hang on their wall. It has to be something that it would be, it has to be impactful and dynamic in such a way that it is a standalone piece of art that you would put on your wall or in a gallery. And that's what you should always be pointing toward. So, so there's a piece of that's the writer, where it's sort of like, I put whatever I think is going to fuel that. I sort of create the fuel for it, and I put that in the script. And then the artist gets to make something that is memorable and hangable on the wall. So, well, like you said, gallery quality stuff, like these Dave Wilkins covers. You could do an entire exhibit in any museum in the world of Dave Wilkins covers just for Masters of the Universe alone.
Yes, he did a lot of DC work. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
All right.
And I feel the same way about Daniel's interiors on the book. I mean, stuff that just knocks me out. I've between Wilkins and Daniel HDR, I think we're Hordak fans are just eating well right now. I mean, he's just incredible and beautiful and dynamic and scary, and he's just he's never popped like this off the page for me.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Oh. So, all right. So let's transition into your bread and butter, the story, right? And look.
Well, I'm going to stop you and correct you if I may.
Yeah, please.
Is that Daniel and I are partners in the storytelling. The story is both of our domain. What the artist does, and this is all comics, what the artist does, they're part of the storytelling. So it is, we write story by and things like that in the credits, but I think it's important to get it out there as much as I can and to explain to fans and readers who don't know the process and how we look at it. Right. That the story, the script is my domain. The blueprints for the story, the architectural design for the story is what I'm responsible for. And then I had an artist I worked with recently was quoting someone, I can't remember who he was quoting, but he said, the writer's job is to tell a story to the artist, and the artist's job is to tell that story to the world. That's how it works, So anyway, on with your question, but I just felt like it's important to.
No, it's a good point. I should have used a different term from story. I once had.
You don't know. A lot of people don't know that's how we look at it in the industry. So
I think it was last year I had Robert Lamb on. He was a writer, but he was also storyboard artist for Filmation, He-Man and Masters of the Universe. Yeah. And he was explaining to me like you would get like 2 sentences and how you could storyboard it like a million different ways, and it can affect the impact of those 2 sentences. It can make it happier to incredibly depressing, depending on how it's drawn. So I definitely see your point. Absolutely.
Well, and to that end, I come from animation, and to that end, we quite often refer now to what we used to call storyboard artists as story artists, because what they're doing is more than just drawing storyboards. They're telling story, and they're integral, and they're a huge part of that process. And much like what I was explaining with comic book artists as well. Yeah. So that's all part of it. But the script, yeah. By the way, I don't think I've ever given an artist in animation or comics 2 lines in a script for them to play with. I overwrite everything to the point where I feel terrible for those artists.
I think he was more talking about like a test. Like if you're applying for a job, they give you 2 sentences and then you storyboard it like 20 different ways.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, all right. So this Masters of the Universe Revolution comic series was brilliant. I mean, it was fantastic. It's possibly my favorite Motu comic series.
Wow, that's
yeah. Oh, I loved it. But when I took a step back from reading issue 4, you realize, whoa, there was no He-Man in this series, not even in a flashback once. So did that ever concern you or Teddy or Rob, that when you were putting this all together?
Well, it would be a flash forward if we were
flash forward, excuse me.
Yeah,
which we did get a flash forward, which we'll get to.
But we do, yeah. Well, not exactly a flash. Yeah. We jump. We certainly jump. Yeah. And you do get without spoiling too much, but I think we talk about it throughout the whole series. You can talk about it now.
Everyone read.
Oh yeah, we're spoiling. Yeah.
Yeah,
we do. I don't know how it's visually depicted because I haven't seen the final product here. I got it in front of me. But, this whole story ultimately hinges on, baby Prince Adam. And so, and who knows who else. But there's the heirs of Grayskull are very much at the center of Hordak's, Saren's, and ultimately Skeletor's plans. So while they're not part of the action, they're not an active participant. They are a passive participant, even from issue 1 in the story. It all hinges on them. It all on him. It all hinges on them if you're reading it with with a broader sense of the mythology that legally sometimes we can't do nowadays.
As you're explaining this, I'm getting flashbacks of poor Kevin, when he was explaining how He-Man was in all those episodes of Revelation, even though he wasn't in those episodes. But you know what? Here your intuition was right, because no one has, and everyone that I've read on the forums and social media is just loving what's coming out. So no one's saying where's He-Man. They love this.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately something we talked about a lot when we were promoting Revelation animated. When it came out, and while that show was also like He-Man was at the center of all of it, but there were a few episodes. There were literally, I believe, 2, if I'm not mistaken, episodes, only 2 episodes of that 10 episode series where he didn't appear in the present in the action. I think it was just episodes 2 and 3.
Well, I guess some people don't qualify Prince Adam as He-Man.
Those people don't know what they're doing. Are they fooled? Do they also not know about the secret of Clark Kent and Superman?
I know. I didn't mean to bring up this issue. I'm sorry.
No. I just think it's funny. I always think it's funny when people are like, he's not in it. I'm like, well, he is in it. He's in it through the whole thing, and it hinges on him. But he's, episodes 2 and 3 of Revelation. Yeah, he's not actively in the present in the story, but he still, shows up. But yeah, so I just feel like that was kind of a thing that took on a life of its own. People just were saying it, but it wasn't. If you look at it, it's not actually true. Yeah. In this case, and so, by the way, one of the things, this is what I was getting at. One of the things that we talked about was, look, it's called Masters of the Universe for a reason. That's why it always was called Masters of the Universe. It's because, He-Man is at the center of it and always has been, but he's not the only one. It's not Master of the Universe. There are a lot of other great characters. And also now there are other time periods that we know and love in the mythology and in the lore in which He-Man's just unfortunately not alive yet, or
Right.
at that point. So in this case, yeah, we're telling a story about when Hordak met Skeletor or Keldor, and you know, it was, to me, I felt like it was important, and this is something Teddy and Rob and I talked about. It was important that even if we're telling a Skeletor Hordak story from before He-Man's even alive, that it still is connected to He-Man in some way. That there's and that's not a difficult task, because, you know, again, he's at the center of everything. The Grayskulls are at the center of everything.
Yeah.
Castle Grayskull and Eternos and Eternia, and you know, it is integral to the plans of Hordak and Skeletor and Saren in this case.
Sure.
And you know, so making that connection was not a difficult thing. I think it enriched the whole thing. It you know, telling their story from, you know, from the perspective of how it relates to the Grayskulls is I think, you know, is the best way to do it.
Oh, I'm loving it too. And you know what I love? You've done a marvelous job, absolutely brilliant, with taking moments, flashbacks from Masters of the Universe Revolution, and then weaving like in and out of them, you know, with those moments, additional dialogue, additional story, you know, filling in the blanks literally, right? So what was
Some of those were tough.
Well, I was wondering, what was the genesis of that, and was it possible that some of that was like cut off scripts originally intended for the animated series?
Well, not exactly. So the genesis of it was, I think, Rob felt like this was a great opportunity for us to do the literary or dramatic reference is a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of thing, where we would be able to see more in terms of what else was happening in the background or around the scenes that we saw in the animated show, and we could kind of expand upon them and flesh them out a little bit more. And we talked about that from day one being something we wanted to do. Wait, are we drinking out of the same mug?
We are. Unfortunately, I ran out of coffee though. It's no longer Skeletor blood coffee.
Well, I'll tell you what. Drink coffee, stay evil. I'm drinking water out of mine right now.
Okay. But
you know, my coffee today, and my doctor won't let me have any more.
Oh, you're kidding? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can't live without my coffee. Oh,
I know.
Did you
in the morning? Yes, definitely.
Did you see real quick? Dark Matter came out with a new flavor. I know you can't drink it. It was like Orko's Magic or something like that. So,
oh, that's fantastic. Oh, that's
yeah.
great.
And
I drink 1 cup every morning, so I'll get it.
And there's a new Orko mug. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Oh, fun. Mm-hmm. Rob talked about that, and we all were like, oh yeah, like we could see the possibility of what we could do. There was such fun stuff, and some of it I got the, you know, opportunity to write in Revolution, in terms of the relationship with the flashbacks we saw in Revolution, Hordak and Keldor, Skeletor. And here's one of the great things about me. We talked about at the beginning how it's like, oh, I wrote this a while ago and I haven't seen the final product, so I might be fuzzy on some of the stuff that we ended up doing. And poor Rob, when I was scripting this, you know, Rob was, I feel like this happened in Revelation too. He'd have to be like, yeah, but this seems to sort of contradict what's in the show, or like a line or something would not quite marry with something that was in the show, or like I would just do something completely different in the book or something. And he's like, I don't like it. How do you not remember what's in the show, Tim? But no, he's like, Tim, you wrote the episode in which these were your lines that you're now referencing. How do you not? And I'm like, it's like a sieve sometimes. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm so excited about writing the new thing that sometimes I forget to really steep myself in the thing that we're referencing again. So he got, I feel like Rob's all constantly exasperated with me, where he's just like, yeah, but it has to be from this perspective because that's what you wrote in the show. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I think I did. And he's like, can we, I'll get emails when he's like, asking somebody, he's like, can we send Tim like, the clips from the stuff that he wrote that we're referencing, and
Look, tell Rob the same thing happened to George Lucas all the time, and he created Star Wars.
Oh
where fans would be saying, if it was either things he said in interviews or even like screenings, test screenings, they would they would correct them.
I blame it on being, for me, it's the life of a freelance writer. Like when I'm done with a project, and sometimes when I'm in the middle of a project, I'm doing multiple projects. But if I'm done with it, I move on to the next thing. And I have to clear out all that memory data and start fresh and fill it all up again.
There was a famous story with George Lucas. Now that I'm thinking about it, he called Return of the Jedi his third film, Revenge of the Jedi.
He did.
And they printed all those posters, and fans were like, Jedis, would not commit revenge. I don't know if that's proper terminology.
Was it the fans that's great?
It was the fans that started like writing in Starlog magazine and all these fantasy magazines, so they actually had he had to like rebrand everything. I think Kenner had to do that with
but then he got his own revenge with Revenge of the Sith. He's like, tell me I can't use it here.
Well, then they got, with those prequels, all upset with a host of other reasons. So
yeah.
But we don't want to get in that rabbit hole there, Tim.
That's you can't win going down that road.
So
now let's talk about new Star Wars television show. No.
No.
I'm not talking about any of it.
No, I promised to make this short, and that would not be a short one. Fright Zone. So whose ingenious idea was to make the Fright Zone a place that like defies dimensions, that it's like an interdimensional hole that can be accessed, I guess, on every planet, it seems.
Not just planets, it's sort of anywhere, anywhere where it's sort of like, speaking of Star Wars, it's sort of like that, dark side cave in Empire Strikes Back on Dagobah. What's in there, only what you take with you. There's the idea that it can be unlocked simply, the door to the Fright Zone can be unlocked anywhere simply by the connection that the person traveling to the Fright Zone has to fear and evil and whatever. It's essentially another dimension, right? If you were going to get into the science of it, but it is a dimension that's accessed through something almost emotional, and so the idea, I wish I could just flat out claim credit for it. I think probably I pitched something like this when we were talking the story originally, but like all things, these things sort of develop in conversation. Like, Rob and Teddy and I are friends, and we will sit and talk about these ideas, and who can ever know who was the first one to say it and how it all shook out. But so that's the biggest reason why you see Teddy and Rob credited on the covers of these books is because every part of the story is grows out of the conversations that we had about what we wanted it to be and what it could be, and ideas like the Fright Zone being an interdimensional sort of plane that can be accessed simply by maybe not so simply, but by the intention of the traveler who intends to go there. Which as explanations, I don't know that as explanations for the Fright Zone go, to me, that this one is a more satisfying one, and it doesn't negate anything that came before it. I mean, the fact that if you might think, geographically, the Fright Zone is here.
It can be transported, right?
Well, it doesn't negate that. Yeah,
Right.
it is there, but it can also be on Zelkron.
Mm.
It can also be on Wagar.
I love that Empire Strikes Back comparison. That works for me. Yeah. Um, you know, all right. So let me jump to.
Did I throw you? Are you thinking about? You're remembering Yoda right now, aren't you? You're
Yeah,
like, ah,
yeah. I just
such a
love that
good
scene.
time.
I love that scene, and
Oh,
that really is a
fantastic.
good comparison. I just really love that aspect that wherever you look, you can find it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it
Well,
seems so much
if
creepier.
but not just anyone. You know, I
Well,
think
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's dependent upon who's looking for it. Um, you
Mm,
know,
I
and the
like it
fact
though.
that Keldor is able to, that it shows up, that it reveals itself to Keldor when it does, is
Mhm.
is a foreshadowing of his path that's in front of him.
Yeah. So Keldor, Keldor's parents, Saren and King Miro. Um, oh, you know what, Teddy? Tim, this is Teddy. Listen to
We
me.
get that all the time.
Real quick, you expertly played King Miro in Masters of the Universe Revolution.
Thank you.
I mean, I loved it. So, quick left turn, because I always wanted to know, and I don't think you talked about this. I'm not sure. How did you end up getting the voice part? I mean, is this something that you lobbied for, or was it Teddy's idea? You know?
No. I absolutely lobbied. In fact, I negotiated hardcore. I brought in a team of lawyers, and no,
Uh,
how it happened was we were we were talking we were talking about okay, let me give you the full background. So I went
sure.
to drama school,
Yep.
and I came
Teddy
out to
called you a
LA.
Shakespearean actor.
Yeah, I'm a recovering Shakespearean, you know.
Recovery.
I was a Shakespearean actor who moved to Los Angeles,
Mhm.
where I was, basically, I guess I was determined to fail because this is not where Shakespeare happens. So, but I did, to pay the bills, I did commercials and stuff on TV, and um, so that got me into the Screen Actors Guild, the union. And so I kept that union card even when I retired from acting and was writing full time. I kept that Screen Actors Guild. I still do membership. I can't, mostly because I wanted to be able to vote for the Screen Actors Guild Awards at the end of the year, and mostly because they would send screeners of all the movies, so they still do. So I wanted access to all the movies of the year and the TV shows and stuff, and
Mm.
so that's basically why I kept it active for so long. And then I'd always dreamed of being able to have a career in voice acting, but that didn't work out either. I tried, but I didn't really try hard, and it never really happened. And then so when we were working on Revolution, I asked Rob, and I think it was just Rob I asked originally. I was like, look, just even one line, like, just, I would love, and I have a Screen Actors Guild card. I'm union, like, we won't be doing it won't be any shenanigans involved. I'm a real actor. And I even sent my old voiceover demo reel that I
Mm.
had created for animation, and I sent it to Rob, and I said, send this to Colette Sunderman, the voice director, just so she knows that I'm not just a producer who thinks he can do this, that I actually have trained to do this, and I actually have some ability in this regard. And all I'm saying is, give me one line, just somewhere, just one line. And so I basically begged, and but I think I think I made a good case. I think I made a pretty strong case.
Jeez.
So and then I didn't ask for Miro. It just it was I was cast as Miro, and I was informed that I had been cast as Miro. The only thing is, I had written the episode in which Miro appears. So, and I originally that scene with Miro was a lot more Miro dialogue heavy.
I would have wrote more scenes.
No,
Oh,
I did the
Miro.
opposite. I did the opposite. When they told me that I was voicing Miro, I very quietly rewrote the dialogue in the scene to give all the heavy lifting to Harley Quinn, who was playing my wife in the scene.
Amelia, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you really watch that scene again, most of the stuff I'm saying as Miro is like, yes, and or things like that. And the real heavy lifting is Harley. So I felt like I wanted to not screw it up too badly. So that's what I did. But I do feel now a strange kinship to Miro, and so when writing the comic, getting to sort of write stuff about Miro and even writing fake Miro in issue 3, right? Yeah.
Issue 4, I think. Well,
fake Miro's in issue 3. Right?
Oh, yes, fake one when he's tied up, you mean?
Yeah. Which is, it's actually Hordak. Spoilers.
Well, that's fine. This is spoiler. Everyone read it already, so feel free.
Yeah, I actually think that came out kind of confusing. I think that it's really Hordak. Saren's cast the spell, and then he's presenting as Randor. So he's Miro, then he's Randor, and then he's revealed as Hordak. But I think there was just like a line missing. I think it's my fault. I think there should have been one more line to explain that was the transition that was happening with him. Anyway,
I think your whole series actually benefits from the second read. Not that I was confused, but actually any series, to be honest with you, when it's heavy in dialogue and you're taking so much in, it's really like
pretty much everything I write.
It's sometimes like movies that way too. It's the second viewing that it really connects to you. And you pick up things, nuance.
Go back and read that Revelation book, which is. Especially that first issue, man. Like I went hardcore with like this lofty narration for the Orlax. Who you don't know the Orlax who's narrating, but it's like this heavy Shakespearean sort of sounding voice, because I just loved the idea of this, booming voice from the heavens telling you this story.
It made me fall in love with the Orlax, to be honest with you. I didn't fall in love with the Orlax in the animated series, but I fell in love with them, due to those. He was actually across the story of all 4 comic books.
Yeah. He was the connective tissue.
Yes.
Which is why I think they asked me to write it. They were like, because I had given the name to the Orlax and written him into the show.
Teddy made this great custom Orlax.
I know. I was like, I took selfies with it.
I wanted like this much to ask him how much to pay you to make me one, because
he's so talented. I mean, he actually infuriates me. But look at Gwildor. His Gwildor is incredible.
I know.
His work as an executive and as a producer is incredible. The shows he's been integral to bringing to Netflix and other, and Disney and Hasbro and the Hub, the stuff that he's done is incredible. He's had an amazing career, but there's a lot of stuff. The toy photography, if you follow him on Instagram, he does most of that is practical. It's not. He does add in some special effects now, but most of it's practical, and he's just so dang talented. He can kind of do anything. Drives me crazy.
But I don't blame you taking ownership of King Miro. I was talking to Richard Sponder, who was the young actor who played Pig Boy in the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie. Mm-hmm. And he was so excited, by the way, to see Pig Boy in Masters of the Universe Revelation. So excited. He's just waiting for a figure to be made finally, But so I had him on the podcast a few years ago, and he felt proud, like you do feel ownership for characters that you play, especially characters like this. And he was just so.
I don't know if I feel ownership, but I definitely feel a connection to that character now in a way that I never felt a connection to King Miro before.
Of course not. But hey, maybe then I could blame you, sir, for your infidelity because, and well, actually, was it infidelity? Because it revealed in the comic book in issue 4, and I know you haven't seen the final issue yet, but it revealed that he wasn't married to Amelia yet, but when he fathered Keldor, but he was engaged, right? Betrothed.
He was, yeah, it sounds like it was arranged, but I don't know if that's true. But the way that his father talks about it, I think it does seem like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, did he cheat on her, or was it arranged and they didn't really have a relationship yet?
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, look, my headcanon on this
Okay.
is that they weren't married yet, but he did love her and should have been faithful to her. But I would think that he was under Saren's spell and was that yes, it was an infidelity, but it was one that was brought on by an evil act. Which is a whole can of worms that is not something I really want to get into in comics. I don't like, it's fine to live in the headcanon and to think about that, but the implications of that are very serious and are things that it's a real life situation that people deal with. Sure. I would not put it past Saren, though, to have had some kind of spell over Miro in that.
Well, yeah, because we learned, I guess it was issue 3, we learned that Saren, it wasn't a relationship out of love, or we have to assume so, because King Miro was just an instrument for Saren to amass power, because I think she needed, it was like a calculated move. She needed someone that was blood to access the gates to Castle Grayskull.
Exactly. So I think it's a manipulation, from Saren. That doesn't mean, though, that Miro doesn't care for his son. Like, it's still his son. There's, so that it's incredibly complex, which is why we don't get into all that stuff in comics, because we're moving on to the next thing. But certainly in headcanon, you can imagine all the implications to all
sure.
of that.
And while it was a calculated move,
complicated relationships in Masters of the Universe.
And while it was a calculated move to Saren, it was probably a pure relationship to King Miro, or at least a one night of passion.
Well, exactly. I mean, as far as he knows,
Yes.
We just haven't gone into that kind of detail. It does add to the tragedy of Keldor too. I mean, he's been manipulated by Saren from before his conception. He was manipulated into existence, and then continually throughout his life. And ultimately, the product of that manipulation is Skeletor.
Yes. Actually, I want to go there, but let me hit clever payoffs first, because you were talking about Masters of the Universe Revelation comics. So, and I love that prequel comic series as well, Masters of the Universe Revelation. And you took some ambiguity, can't pronounce it today, in that comic series and paid it off like in this series, specifically Skeletor's wife. I'm going to try to remember her name. Zari? I'm not sure.
I don't even remember. I think it's Zari.
Okay. But her necklace from his implanted memories turned out to be the mother's necklace of Saren. And I love this. And I love the fact that this was revealed, many years later, but I'm wondering, was this always part of the plan in 2021 when you wrote that Revelation prequel series for that necklace to be Saren's and not really his wife?
I mean, there's a reason why I heavily focused on that necklace in the Revelation book, because it was, for me, yes, like that was the idea for me, but it wasn't specific. I didn't have the keys to the the Keldor story or Saren or anything like that at that time.
Yeah.
What I was trying to do in that book was to create doubt around the story that Skeletor was telling Evelyn about his origins. And so I felt like we were getting a chance to do the demon from another dimension sort of story. But in the end, I needed something to sort of make it feel like it was not true. And that's just simply Evelyn saying, yeah, but you're full of shit, basically. And so I don't really believe anything you say. And he kind of goes along with it, right? He says, yeah, but it was a nice try or whatever, right?
Well, yeah, but then when he pulled out the necklace,
and then she leaves, and the next thing you see is he pulls out that necklace, right? Which is because otherwise we would have left it. It would have felt like, oh, okay, the whole thing was bogus.
Right.
But for me, it was like, well, was it? Like, I wanted you to question whether it was bogus or not. And so in my mind, the necklace was a great way to do that, because the necklace, as far as how it existed in the story, we were going to associate it with his wife on Infinita, in the realm of Apollios and the heart of the Great Perpetuum. But I love that. But it's weird things I remember, but I don't remember her name. So like, so we were going to associate it with that. So we would think, oh, wait, maybe it was true. Yeah. But in fact, in my mind, I always had a backdoor exit where I was like, no, but that necklace could be anybody's necklace. And it has sentimental value to him. So perhaps he is lying about this story. Now, that was my concept in Revelation, that he was lying perhaps, or maybe he wasn't. Then came Revolution, the TV series, and when we were talking about what we were going to do with that story, and when the idea of doing the Keldor story came up, then we had to solve for the idea, in other ways, we had to solve for the idea that Skeletor was unaware of his Keldor origin, and that meant that in the Revelation comic book, he is telling what he thinks is the truth with that story. That's what he believes is the truth. But that's why we created the in the Revolution comic, the mnemonic cradle, which is a technological device that Hordak uses to manipulate memories. And so that it becomes, it is revealed to us that Hordak invented the entire story about the Great Perpetuum, and it was another manipulation of Keldor and Skeletor.
And it's such a better choice. I mean, I don't mean to diminish your lying idea, but especially and legally, I want to say this is not connected. What we know of Adora in other Motu stories and other Motu worlds, that she was also, her memory was taken away and she was made into a Force captain. So, and Hordak has a behavior of doing.
I mean, look, that came up in the Revolution meetings. I might have been Teddy who brought that up, who said, look, Hordak is a memory manipulator. Like, this is what he does. So and I think everybody, we were just like, oh yeah. So he manipulated Keldor and Skeletor's memories. And that's why, and then we kind of then backfilled the idea that in the Revelation comic, he's telling what he thinks is the truth, but it's not. And it all kind of fit. It was in some ways, some of that's a little bit luck, where we were trying to solve a problem and we happened happily to have left ourselves all the tools we needed to be able to make it make sense and make it even more satisfying in the end. That's just part of the fun of the story creation process. And when you have really smart, dedicated fans in the room, like Rob and Teddy, and me and Kevin, that's the kind of stuff that gets produced. That's the kind of work product we come up with, and for us, it's very satisfying, and I hope for the fans it is too.
Oh, it was, at least for me. So talking about, and this could be a yes or no question, talking about erasing Keldor's memories, and hopefully you have this straight in your mind, even though you wrote it so long ago. Because one of the things I want to make sure I have straight is regarding Keldor's memories. So Hordak wants Keldor's memories erased and replanted with new ones. And at first, Keldor is fighting to hang on to his family memories. But then Keldor finally relents, not because, Hordak has increased the output of the machine, but because Skeletor, like a split personality of Keldor, convinces him to do so, because his path to power will only be clearer if he can get past his childhood strife, his demons, pun intended.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's what we called it. That's how we said it in the room. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have that correctly. That's what occurred.
Yeah. Look, this is, and I feel like it might have been Rob who said it first, and we kind of all started yes-anding on it, which was, it needed, Rob felt strongly about this. I think we all did, but he put words to it, which was important, which was that ultimately there's a lot in this book that could make Keldor, and then by extension Skeletor, a sympathetic character, who's just manipulated by everybody. And in the end, he becomes a real tragic, sympathetic character who you really feel bad for. And it could easily go that way.
Sure.
And it was important to not go that way. It was important for the history of this franchise, for the lore, for the whole mythology, that ultimately Keldor has to make the decision to become Skeletor. He has to give up what might have been good and innocent about himself, all that was innocent about himself. And ultimately the final manipulation is of one of his own making, where he invents Skeletor, even though the flesh has been burned from his, it's not about the flesh. It's about, his intentions and his plans, going forward, who he's going to be. He kills Keldor so that Skeletor will live. He has to be the one to make it. Can't be that Hordak increased the output of the mnemonic cradle. It can't be that he was manipulated into it by Saren in the end. It had to be his choice.
It kind of plays into that line.
The good guy.
It kind of plays into that line in the series. My name is Skeletor,
Right.
when he calls him Keldor. Yeah.
He chooses it. It has to be his choice, because otherwise he's not the villain, really. He's just another person manipulated by bigger villains. And that's not Motu. I don't think. I think in the end, Skeletor, ultimately, I think what it is the last manipulation is Skeletor manipulates Keldor into extinguishing all of whatever was innocent about him, so that he can become malevolence itself.
I love that. I love that.
I mean, that's ultimately the Lord of Destruction. The first thing he destroys is Keldor.
Yeah. So real quick, and this one I think you might push back against based on our previous conversations. The whole
All right, I'm ready.
The whole prophecy, right? Because I took it a different way, but I want to make sure I have it straight. So the prophecy that Hordak was saying was a newly born heir, a descendant of King Grayskull, would bring on Hordak's destruction. And in the terms of what I saw in Masters of the Universe Revolution, it obviously seems like He-Man, but I was thinking it's actually Skeletor, right? Because of his new consciousness, his persona of Skeletor, he is essentially, newly born, and he is an heir, so to speak. He is in the bloodline. So I took, at least in the context, I know he's back to life at the end of Revolution, right? We see him being regenerated, but at least in the context of that show and the way I read the comic, I was like, oh, Skeletor, he's the one,
Is he?
Well, no, I mean, he might not be, right? It might be He-Man, or
What
She-Ra, or
what you're exactly what
somebody.
you're articulating is something that was really intentional, on our
Okay.
part, which is the reason why it's written that way is because there are several answers to that.
Mm,
There are several different ways to go with that, which
yeah.
means there are places to take these stories, into the future. And so I can't tell you the answer to that,
Okay.
but I think it is left up for interpretation.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people would argue and say, no, it's Adam. And some people might even say it's Adora. And some people might say it's Keldor or Skeletor.
My
But
initial go-to was Adam, but then I'm like, wait a minute,
yeah,
and Skeletor kind of
then our evil plan worked.
That's good. That's good.
Excellent.
It's good when it's up to the
No, I mean,
interpretation of the reader.
I love stuff that's ambiguous enough that
Yeah.
it lives in the eye of the beholder. It's
Mm.
where you read it and you think, oh, it has to be this, and then you think, well, I guess it could be this. And then a lot of fans will say, well, I want to know what the real answer is, and then they'll come and send me a message on social media and try to get me to tell them the real answer, and they're so unsatisfied because I will be like, the real answer is whatever you think it is, for now.
Yeah. It reminds me of this great. Have you ever seen the Richard Linklater series, like Before Midnight, After?
Yeah,
The second one. I don't know if you remember the ending where what is that?
I don't remember anything. I think we've established.
I love Ethan Hawke. He's married and he's at his this woman that he had an affair with, or no, he had a relationship with when he was like teenagers, in her apartment, and she's dancing, and she says to him, "This is the end of the movie. He's supposed to be on a plane and go back to his wife, and she says to him, 'Honey,' as she's dancing, 'you are going to miss that plane.'" And he says, "I know." And it left me for years until they did a sequel. Like, does he mean, I know I'm going to be late, I'm going to miss my plane to rejoin my wife? Or is he intentionally saying, I know I'm going to miss his plane and not return to my wife because I'm with you? This one night stand I had that's been magical in my head. And I
love stuff. I love stuff like that. There's a lot of that in stuff that I write. And I did this. I did an animated adaptation of a DC book, of a Batman book called The Long Halloween. And one of the things in that story is it's the origin. It presents the origin of the character Two-Face, and Two-Face is someone who is, at least in the way we present him, he's someone who is of two minds about everything. He could go one way, it could go the other way, and everything's a coin flip. He has to flip a coin, and it tells him what he's going to do. And so it became important for me to write so much of that movie. And if you watch it again, if you really listen to it, it's easier when you read the script actually than when you watch the movie, because I would get questions all the time from the director. He would come to me and he'd say, what does this line mean? Does it mean this or does it mean this? And I would say, exactly.
I love that. And
it's throughout the whole script. It was important to me to try to make it so that like everything could be interpreted two ways. And so it was up to the story artists and then up to the actors to, and the actors had questions about it too. They'd say, does it mean this or this? And I'd say, you tell me what it means. Right. And they would be so angry with me, but I was like, it is just the same way that it's up to the viewer to decide kind of, wait, what is that? I think it means this. I'm sure it means this. It was the same for the actors and the artists. I wanted them to interpret it how they would and then present it how they would. And so sometimes in the movie, you get a pretty solid interpretation of it. But and so oh, it means this. But when you read it on the page, it can be infuriating because you're like, wait, does it mean X or Y? I love lines like that. I love moments like that.
Me
and
too.
So I'll always write those things and wherever I can. And so, yeah, the prophecy is a great example of that. in the Revolution comic.
All right, let's push through this here. The end, sir. We finally have an end where you flip the script, right? Well, I mean, meaning at the end of this comic book series, you flip the script where it feels like a prequel flipped into a sequel, you know? And we see, and I'm going to be careful the name I use here, we see Despara on her ship learning everything we just learned, you know, in series 1 through 4 up to this point. And then the big reveal, you know, that motherboard is still operational, you know, just her head, but she's still operational. And wow. And it states the end of a revolution and a new beginning. And I loved it, Tim. So I guess now this is really a starting point for if you guys do ever get to the point of continuing with a season 3 or what have you, more comics. This is a starting point of the next chapter if we get lucky enough that you get to continue on, right?
I mean,
it kind of implies it on the page. Yeah, I sent you that thing. Flip to the end there. I mean,
I think. Well, it's just the way you phrased it. I just think that I don't want to make it sound like this is a certain plan that we have, and that this is going to be this thing now. You know, there's some of it is, you know, hopes and wishful thinking on what we would like to do.
Sure.
Or what certainly what Rob and Mattel would like to do. But you know, it's also part of it. This is why it's a tricky thing to answer, is this is specifically about the Revolution universe, this version of this story. And so it relates to that. It doesn't necessarily relate to everything else in the canon or throughout the various canons. So it definitely, there is a story, there is a place, there is a third act that this story has that Rob and Teddy have, you know, been talking about from the get-go.
Yeah, they publicly said they have it all laid out. You know, it's just up to if the viewers keep watching, and it's just up to
and the question is, does it happen on TV? Does it happen at Netflix or somewhere else? Does it happen on in the pages of comic books? I don't know, but it, you know, or maybe it never happens. Maybe it's just one of those things that'll be lost to time.
I always thought, I'll be careful, and this is just me in my head, I always thought it could be told, but in a renewed way. Do you get what I mean?
Seems like you're pitching a title. Your Masters of the Universe renewal is what.
No, but a different main character. You know what I mean? It could actually be presented as a whole new, brand new thing. But it really. Do you know Buffy?
There's a million possibilities.
There's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then there was a show called Angel, right? Which was like and Angel felt like a brand new show, even though it was connective tissue, you know, to Buffy, because so. I don't know.
There's a million different ways to come at it. I know how Rob and Teddy would like to come at it, and I'm fully on board with them on that.
Oh, sure.
But
Rust, huh?
or Kevin as well. You know, but I do feel like a lot of it is the usual, terribly unsatisfying answer for Motu fans, which is everything's in flux. Everything's in flux. We don't know. We hope and we wish and we plan,
right?
But we just don't know if we're going to how or even if we're going to get to do more, continue, what we're doing.
What we saw at the end here does feel like a step forward, meaning with Mother's Board Head, we actually it was a brief step. It's a minor step, but we actually went forward a little bit, which was exciting for me. It wasn't just a look back. It was a tiny step forward where we got a little more of what happened after.
Isn't that what Revelation and Revolution have always been from the start? you know, we were always trying to honor the canon and everything that had come before, but we were trying to fill in the blanks and move the story forward in ways that fans like us had always wanted them to move forward. I mean, Revolution in particular, I mean, you finally had that beautiful embrace between, you know, Adam and Tila.
Yeah.
And you know, these are things that we've been waiting for a long time, that have sort of been stuck in time for so long. And now, you know, so while we're rooted in all of that mythology and lore that's come before us, we're always trying to sort of just push the ball a little bit further down the field. So this is another, I think, example of that. And that's very much what the core of Revelation and Revolution has always been. So hopefully we'll, when this whole if this is how it's finished, then it does what you know, maybe it'll do what you're saying, which is it leaves us in a place where we can kind of move forward now, and new voices will come in and they'll do some new stuff that maybe happens in, you know, takes us into the future of Motu. And you know, and if it happens after that third act that Teddy and Rob talk about, then hopefully that will culminate in a, you know, in a way that points us toward that future, free from the constraints of everything that's come before, you know, and kind of get to take this thing into the next, you know, century.
A new status quo, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these are just things that I would love to see as a fan and as someone who's gotten to work around this franchise and these characters that have become so important to me, so meaningful to me. But you know, I don't know. I often think about my my participation in Motu lore and canon, and you know, I tend to get really excited about the little things, like, you know, naming things like the Orlax of Primaria, and the one that nobody ever talks about is the Trollan Spellspring, which I was so proud of. So I always get, you know, sort of wrapped up in things like that, but I kind of, when I look at it now, I think maybe going forward and in someday far in the future, people will look back and look at these things that Tim Sheridan has his name on, and they'll say, oh, I feel like he was really trying to push the envelope and push the boundaries of character and relationships and make this world, you know, richer and more Shakespearean and you know, and complex, and in, you know, to borrow a phrase from Doctor Who, bigger on the inside. You know, that's the way I always kind of come at things. I think I want to bring an emotional life to it that is bigger than even the huge universe, you know, threatening plots that are happening on the surface. Well,
you don't have to wait. I already feel that way.
So, thank you.
I'm such a fan.
Well, tell other people.
I have. You know, we need an omnibus when this is all said and done of all the Revolution comics and continuity. Get Tim's stuff in there too.
And Tim Seeley's book as well, which is in the Masters in the Revelation universe. That'd be great. That'd be great. Dark Horse, get on it.
Yeah. Oh, I would love that. All right. So what's it before we wrap up? What else do you have got going on? Do you like what current projects are out? You know, that you can talk about?
Thank you. Most stuff I can't talk about.
Of course,
always the way. Yeah. But I am traveling around as usual. If anybody out there is going to LA Comic-Con, which is in my backyard, in New York Comic-Con, I think I'm going to be at some fan expos coming up in other cities as well, but I can't announce that yet because I don't think they've announced anything. Okay. But so I'm there. You know, I signing stuff, and if people want to meet and complain about stuff that they don't like. No, see, that's not the thing that happens at conventions. They come and they want to talk about what they love, just like you, AJ, instead of the stuff they don't like, which is why I go to them. I love going to them.
It's easier to complain on the internet, you know.
It's so true. It's easy. I'm going to be out there talking about Motu, and certainly when the trade comes out for Motu Revolution. I'll be out there signing those and talking about that. Speaking of trades, a little plug, I have coming out on September 24th, the trade paperback for my latest DC series, Alan Scott, The Green Lantern. This lovely book. This is the first time I've ever shown it on camera, I think. Oh, there we go.
That is great that you got a copy so early. What's September 24th?
Yeah, the trades, they usually print these pretty early and they send them to us early. But so that'll be coming out. And
that was critically acclaimed. That was really critically acclaimed.
Oh, thank goodness. If you're a fan of DC Comics, if you've always been curious about the character of Alan Scott, it's a great book to kind of start with. It sort of starts you at a baseline of here's who he is. You see his origins, why he is who he is, and how he came to be, and then you can enjoy him and all the stories that are coming out in the future. He's going to be a big part of Jeff Lemire's new JSA book at DC. So that's happening as well. And then more things that I can't talk about will happen in the future.
More, just generally speaking, comics in your future. You can't say that even.
I mean, there will be more stuff in the future.
Awesome. And hopefully
even though I am so much happier as a writer working in television and movies, and you know what I've discovered the reason is, and Motu has a big part to play in this.
Why is that?
Speaking of, and I say part to play as a foreshadowing of what I'm going to tell you, which is that the thing about comics that is less satisfying for me as a creator, as a writer, is that I don't get to work with actors. And one of the greatest things, especially on Motu, Revelation and Revolution, is that incredible cast that we get to play with and get to work with. And the way that people of their stature bring to life the stuff that we put on the page invests it with even more and makes it seem like we're even better at our job than we as writers are. And so I'm always missing those great actors like, my goodness, Mark Hamill, William Shatner, who blew the doors off the place. Lena Headey was incredible. Griffin Newman, who, even Teddy Biaselli as Gwildor.
Yeah. And how many people can say they fathered William Shatner?
And Mark Hamill.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And also Diedrich Bader, but people are more excited about. People are much more excited about, unfortunately, because I love Diedrich so much.
Oh, I do too. I love him in what was that sitcom, American Housewife?
He's incredible in everything. Diedrich Bader can do anything, and he's so good. I first worked with him on a series called Justice League Action, which was a funny series, and he played Booster Gold, a DC character, and he was so funny. And it just and they ended up having me write Booster Gold into every episode I wrote because he was so good that they just wanted him in everything. So anyway, Shatner, Hamill, Bader, it's incredible.
All right, so we should wrap this up. Oh, wait. Just say yes or no. Panther. Was that Panther? Baby Panther?
Oh, good question. Was it? I don't know. I certainly hope that it is. But in the script, I simply refer to him as a Dialinx cub.
Okay.
And but can I quickly tell you this?
Yeah, please.
When we got the colors back for those pages, he was and I had written in the script, I think I said purple Dialinx cub. And when we got him back, he was a ginger cat. He was orange. And I was like, oh, does it matter? Do I care? Should I say anything? And I didn't know. So I mentioned it to my editor, and but I told him, I was like, look, it's no big deal. Like, it's just a little Easter egg thing that fans might get excited and think this could be Panther, or maybe not.
No.
But in my mind, it's Panther, but I don't know.
People get excited. There was someone in our we posted the preview on ForEternia.com, and already someone in the comments was saying like, oh, I wonder how if that's baby Panther, how he react to King Randor as an adult. Like he would go to attack him, Skeletor would say attack, and
Right? Yeah.
and then he gets a sniff of him and won't attack, and
This is what I mean about making the character's emotional life, even Panther's, more complex and bigger on the inside, which is now you put Panther in front of Randor and you wonder, maybe there's still a love connection there. Who knows?
maybe. And Skeletor with his memory wiped, he'd be like, "What are you doing,
What are
Panther?"
you doing? Yeah, they did change it. He is purple. He's
Yeah.
more clearly a Dialings cub now, and so, yeah,
But who is he
that's a great
exactly?
question. And as usual, I have an unsatisfying answer for you, which is
As usual.
I didn't call him Panther in the script,
Okay.
but in my hopes and dreams, he is Panther as a fan. But that's up to Mattel to tell us if it is or not. I don't know.
Very nice. To be continued, hopefully.
Mhm.
So, all right. I think we run the gamut. You got anything else, Tim?
No, just, hey, today, Masters of the Universe Revolution issue 4 is available. I hope everyone picks it up, and go to your local comic shop and pick it up. And I hope you enjoyed this story, and hopefully we'll have more.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on, guys. If you haven't already, pick up the copies of Masters of the Universe Revolution. All 4 copies physically or digitally or both. Don't wait for the trade in January. Support the individual issues.
That's how we get more. It's how we get more. The only way we get more is if people buy it.
Yes. Yeah. Support this work so we can get more story installments in this amazing Revelation and Revolution continuity. So don't miss out. Support this comic. And all right, so that's a wrap all. We would like to thank as always, wonderful Tim Sheridan so much for joining us today. You are always such a nice friend and a pleasure.
You're wonderful to have me on. Thank you so much. You were just the best. I thank you for everything you do for the Motu fan community. We, speaking on behalf of the entire community. Thank you.
I'll take it. Thank you. And we would like to thank this wonderful community out there for listening and watching this podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please show us your support by liking or subscribing to our streams. You can always drop us a line too by sending us an email at foreternia@gmail.com. We do love the feedback. And as always, please visit us at foreternia.com. Follow the latest updates and news, as well as links to our social media pages that can help you stay up to date with all of the Masters of the Universe Revelation and Revolution content. So that's it. I would like to thank you again for listening, and let the power return. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.